Welcome to a little bit of Florida here in Colorado. My name is Joel, and I am an avid defender of new EPCOT. This video is going to be formatted weird. I apologize. I just thought shooting in the woods would be kind of fun, but it has proven to be a logistical nightmare. This is like the 5th time I'm trying this, so bear with me as I kind of just pace around here. And it's going to be crunching sounds and all that, and I'm going to be a little bit out of breath. But I need to pace. I'm sorry. I'm that passionate. Now, when I said that I'm a defender of new EPCOT, I believe most of you know what I'm referring to, but if you haven't kept up with the last 5-6 years or so of the developments happening at the park, I recommend that you check out a video by Poseidon Entertainment. Great guy who made a video recently addressing Communicore Hall and how that kind of signals, the ending of this, what he considered to be an underwhelming sort of downgrade of EPCOT as of late. And obviously, as someone who's defending, the point of this video is to defend new EPCOT, and that video is very much criticizing it. I do recommend that you check it out. I'll try to remember to link it here somewhere in the description or something, because it's a great video detailing a lot of really good points about the current Walt Disney Company leadership and, maybe the laziness of Imagineering, budget cuts, anything like that. All things that, like I said, I disagree with, but I understand all of the points. They were made very, very clear. And, my experience is going to differ from others. And that's totally cool. Many people have considered these new upgrades to the park to be a downgrade. And if you're unfamiliar with those downgrades, definitely, just check out that video, because it details everything very, very well, and gets kind of to the meat of it and explains to viewers, like, hey, this is what this means, this is what this change was, and what it signals, what it means for the park. So yeah, check that out, because I'm not going to get into detail with like every single new edition or anything. There's too many videos already doing that. But I'm just going to be defending the things that you, if you are watching this video, probably already know about. So I do want to start off with hypothesis. My hypothesis is that a lot of actually, first of all, let me just say the disclaimer that I hate giving, because and you hear it in every video, but it's like I really have to disclaim this, that guess what, my experiences with arts and your experiences with art are going to be different. Theme parks are art, and I am allowed to like a thing, you are allowed to dislike a thing, I'm allowed to dislike a thing, you're allowed to like a thing. We're all allowed to have nuanced opinions on these things. That's okay. We can have conversations and just, vibe out and enjoy the art form. Anybody who thinks that, anybody who uses words like objective, I got into kind of a tiff with somebody on a Walt Disney Imagineering Instagram comments where I'm like, somebody confronted me about my defense of Communicore Hall, and I don't remember the username, and I don't care to look into it. If you want to look into it, it's fine, because I don't, this person's entitled to their opinion and everything. But I've been hearing a lot of the word objective used lately, especially when it comes to these EPCOT, either upgrades or downgrades or whatever you want to consider them. Because like, oh, see, this place used to have things in it, and now it has different things in it that I don't like, or I consider to be dead space, or whatever it might be. So that means this is objective. It's just objectively bad. And I don't like that. I really don't like that way of thinking, because, although I agree for the most part in themed entertainment, the more is more way of thinking tends to be true. More animatronics, more exhibits, more things to do. With theme parks as an art form, your job is to kind of overstimulate people a little bit, because it's entertainment. And overstimulation tends to, you have more choice of things to do, more things to look at, and less reasons to get bored. So I understand people thinking like something like Interventions, going away and turning into Communicore Hall might seem like a downgrade, because it's like, oh, but there's nothing in Communicore Hall that interests me personally, so it's a downgrade. And sure, you can think that, that doesn't mean that it's objectively a downgrade. There's no such thing as objectivity in art. There's art theory, there's design theory, there's color theory, there's music theory, there's film theory, but you can challenge that theory. You can challenge the notion that a thing is supposed to be a certain way. That's just how art works. So I adamantly disagree with anybody who says that this is a objective anything, whether upgrade or downgrade. But now it's time to actually do something really, really quick here. I have this piece of paper, and on it, I copied and pasted a letterboxd review of all things that I wrote. I'm going to be self-indulgent here and kind of get into, because I have a hypothesis here that the reason I think people are misunderstanding the point of New Epcot is that Disney doesn't understand, at least their advertising team or their, corporates deciding, there seems to be an issue here where Imagineering is given a budget to do a thing, and Disney commissions the thing, and Imagineering tries to do their best with the concept that they were given, the commission, abiding by the rules of said commission, and abiding within the budget of that thing. And then once they finish the thing, release it to the public, then it's the marketing team's job to market it and sell it to people and post about it on social media and make commercials about it. And there seems to be a disconnect. Not only has New Epcot obviously been subject of multiple budget cuts and changes over the course of time and COVID and all these different things, one of the biggest disconnects I've noticed has been between the marketing language of the Walt Disney Company, which seems to be trying to be synergistic with other parks, other brands. So, DPEP, the organization of, parks, products, seems to be in a state, especially right now, but I've noticed it throughout, the company's history, where they're trying to be synergistic with other brands. Like, they want ESPN to sound exactly like DPEP. They want Pixar to sound exactly like DPEP. So because of this, you get kind of these bland, vague Disney corporate jargon statements from the company and social media posts and all these things talking about the parks in a certain way that doesn't feel true or authentic to why we as theme park enjoyers actually like the parks. So I've especially noticed this with Epcot, and especially with New Epcot. Because New Epcot, to me, as a purist, the reason I love, or really like at least, the new changes happening is because it seems to be going back to a lot of the original core design philosophies of 80s Epcot. I'm not saying Walt's Epcot, because that's something I'm going to get into here in just a sec. But opening day, opening decade, opening day to roughly 1989, I believe, when Wonders of Life opened. That span of time before, the first big changes to the park where, the land pavilion got refurbished and communicore became Innovations, all these different things. Logo changes, all these big transformations. New Epcot seems to be going back to a little bit of that. And some people have called that nostalgia bait. But I've found it to be pretty honest and refreshing for the company to be doing this. And I'll explain what that means and how I believe they're doing this a lot better. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it right this second. But yeah, I like this kind of return to, a lot of what I love about 80s Epcot. It's not verbatim doing the same thing, because it understands too that we live in a very different world. But the means by which Disney tries to convey a avant-garde park going back to a lot of its avant-garde original principles, Disney doesn't know how to sell that. So to stay brands, to maintain that brand synergy, and so that, when they post on Instagram talking about new things being added to Epcot, Disney wants to sound like it's the same person between that post about New Epcot and, hey, look, here's a new meet and greet at the Magic Kingdom or something, whatever. They want it to sound kind of the same. My problem is that that does a little disservice to how unique Epcot is as a concept for a theme park. So I have here a letterboxed review that I wrote for the EPCOT Becoming Inside the Transformation special from Nat Geo that they did advertising new EPCOT. And this kind of gets into what I feel like Disney's doing right now. So let me just say this: the special was not good. All I'm gonna say here, but here's a review. I'm gonna yap. Letting Chelsea Weikart talk for a few seconds about the actual design process of the Journey of Water Pavilion was the best decision made for the special. Growing up on specials like this, I knew what to expect, but you'd think with this little material to cover, something of substance would occasionally happen. Not really. I don't mind that these kinds of specials exist. I'm gonna sit down here so this paper doesn't blow away. I know not everyone knows what EPCOT is or what the last couple of years have entailed for the park, but a good film should be entertaining nonetheless and be able to articulate the complexities of something like this in layman's terms. If I didn't know anything about theme parks before this, I'd still walk out totally unaware of what EPCOT is or why it matters. This thing takes 15 whole minutes to explain the history of EPCOT. That's a lot of real estate for 43-minute total runtime. So I'm not necessarily angry that this didn't get into the fact that the park was kind of originally a technocratic bureaucracy, but you had 15 minutes right there. And I get it, Disney didn't want to acknowledge that, so stop pretending like 80s Epcot was Walt's last dream. It wasn't. So stop bringing Walt into this if you're not going to acknowledge what he was really doing. Trying to build utopia. By the way, this is coming from a 60s Epcot concept sympathite, besides the scary stuff, an 80s Epcot fanatic, 90s Epcot nostalgic in a childhood guilty pleasure kind of way, and a modern Epcot apologist. I love this park in more ways than I'd like to admit. My fandom for it has genuinely impacted my life in so many good and sometimes bad ways. During my DCP, I spent most of my days off just hanging around at Epcot, pretending like the park meant more to me, more to those around me, than a place to get drunk and review festival food. I'm so happy that stuff like the semi-return of Communicore, the wonders of Xandar Pavilion, Journey Water, and Awesome Planet, among other things, seem to subtly be bringing the park back home. It was never perfect, but it was cool. I just don't like seeing that positive reversion represented like this. Disney corporate jargon isn't Epcot, sweatshop merchandise isn't Epcot. This park is a beautiful representation of what happens when people get together to educate and inspire through art. In my opinion, it's the greatest piece of themed entertainment ever. The UX, the architecture, the music, everything. I know that's a lot to capture on film, but come on, Disney. You owe it to yourselves to be honest about what this park really is. So that was what I had to say about that special. And I think it kind of gets to the core of how I perceive all these changes. Because I feel like a lot of it is good. And the reason so many people are so quick to not defend Disney in their decisions are, number one, Disney just maybe not being in a great place right now in multiple facets, not just the parks division. But like creatively, they seem a little bankrupt right now. So I don't blame anyone for kind of vomiting that back to Epcot. But it especially seems to be a problem right now that Disney doesn't know how to market a avant-garde park returning to its avant-garde roots. And by avant-garde, by the way, I should get into that. I mean that the park, especially the Future World section of the park, the former Future World section of the park, was a weird thing to understand. It used, the thing that I love about the structure of old Epcot attractions, the opening decade slate of Epcot attractions, is that it used a great 3-act structure in the same way that film does to portray very complex ideas. You have a weird, very industrial, not even industrial, I guess the term would probably be more so, I guess just modernist, and even a little postmodern. The architecture beckons you forward with, Spaceship Earth being based on, Buckminster Fuller's geodesic dome concepts, and the Universe of Energy Pavilion looking like it's literally shooting out of the ground, and it's like a burst of energy, or digging into the ground, whatever way you want to see it, or, the World of Motion Pavilion being shaped like a wheel. And these are things that the brain receives and understands as, that looks like a wheel. and it's called the World of Motion. I want to, go see what that's about, because it's such a weird thing, especially to our modern understanding of theme parks, with everything being so hyper immersive, and there's no such thing as simple dark rides anymore. Everything has to be immersive, and I'm not saying that that's bad. I like stuff like Galaxy's Edge, but it's weird framing Epcot again against the current lens of how we perceive theme parks as a culture. And but the structure is great, because once you enter, the Imagination Pavilion, for example, you have Magic Journeys, and then you have Journey into Imagination, and these are this is the first, the first and second act of your experience as you walk through a pre-show. That in the Imagination Pavilion, there's beautiful murals all across the walls, and when you go into the Seas Pavilion, there's, you watch a movie before you even get on the hydrolators, and there's all this cool stuff, slowly dipping your toes into the water of like, hey, this is an educational thing, but look, like, learning can be cool. And on top of that, it's not like we're going to force you to learn about the things that you like. It's just, here's a pavilion, here's how it's shaped. We're going to beckon you forward with the shapes that you like. It understands that the brain is attracted to shapes and colors and these simple things, but then you go and dive deeper, and there's more to it than that. There's a beauty in learning something and not knowing or understanding things immediately, and just being intrigued by something. And I don't know, Epcot is just so great, because it's such a choose your own adventure park. And then you have a post show, which is the third act, and now you have the Image Works, and you get to go upstairs and hang out in the Image Works, or you have the Trans Center, and you get to learn about okay, granted, the World of Motion I don't morally necessarily agree with. The roadways have destroyed our lives. Same with the Universe of Energy Pavilion. Energy is a cool concept to explore, but I don't like oil propaganda. I'm sorry. But Energy, You Make the World Go Round is such a good song anyway, so I'll forgive it. It's fine. The building's cool. But anyway, that's essentially my love of old Epcot. And I noticed, as you could tell, looking at me, I am a young person. The Epcot that I grew up with was not this opening decade version of the park. I never got to ride Horizons. Never got to ride the original Universe of Energy. Never got to ride Listen with the Land. I only know how to live with the land. And so I grew up with Innoventions Epcot. I never got to see Communicore until, I guess, now, technically. So I have this postmodern, Frisbane, kind of new age, I guess you could say, like, celebrate the future hand in hand kind of. That's the Epcot that I grew up with as a young child and went to. That Innoventions music loop is always in my head at all times. And like I said in that paper, I from a nostalgia lens, love that version of Epcot. But let's be honest, it's not sustainable to build a park like that. The great thing about these pavilions and how they were designed, you look at something like Communicore, and it's modular. It's an open concept space with a lot of room that you could just, is this exhibit no longer topical? Let's just remove it, replace it with something. And I love that. And that the 90s Eisner era kind of destroyed a little bit of the park for me, because, or at least it's something that I understand it destroyed the park in retrospect, looking back at the history, because it's no longer modular. You take Innoventions and you build walls, and now all these exhibits feel a little bit more concrete, and it's like, sure, it's cool, but and it's so much more based on, let's not educate the public about how computers are cool or anything, or how communication and understanding communication will help us be better as people, or how circle of life and environmental fable, screw symbiosis, let's just recycle the footage and show people that the only lens through which we can understand something like the climate crisis, we can only understand it through the lens of the characters that I'm familiar with. It's that kind of Project Gemini era of thrill rides and everything. And I'm not against thrill rides. Test Track's great. I'm not against IP being used, hence why I'm defending new Epcot. But there is something to be said for that modular nature of, let's build a thing. Let's build a World's Fair, basically, that's permanent. But these are spaces that can easily be changed, and this is for a culture that is constantly changing. There's something about 90s Epcot that just felt like, no, this is a theme park. Like, let's just, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's different, you know? We can't treat Epcot the same as other theme parks because it's designed at its core very differently. And I don't know, I just don't know how I feel about the Eisner era. But anyway, that kind of leads us to this point that we're at right now, where Disney saw that the Eisner era, you know, Ellen's Energy Adventure, surprise, surprise, didn't age well. And now we're stuck with a bunch of old attractions that now feel especially old, and now we can't change them because, you know, Innoventions has a weird road thing on the ground that would be much more difficult to replace than just, you know, blocking off a small exhibit. Like, now we have to change the whole infrastructure of how this experience is framed. So Disney now is going back to that modular nature. First thing that they did, I said I wasn't going to detail in order like any of the things that they are doing, but I do need to reference a few of these, use a few of these things as reference points. The first thing that really signaled the new Epcot transformation is the neighborhood concept, which, listen, Future World's a sick-ass name, but it's not Epcot. To me, at least, it's not, it's not the appeal that I get out of the park. I get that the park, when opening, was framed as this, here's what the future is going to look like, and, you know, 21st century begins October 1982. And that's great, but I don't think it's honest to what the park is. The park is not a, you know, Future World. This strikes me as just another Tomorrowland. It strikes me as we're going to go visit the future. And it made me confused as a child because we go into, like, the land pavilion, and I'm like, this feels like a mall. And there's, like old-timey farm side kind of music playing here. I don't know, it struck me as inauthentic and it felt like a marketing decision to name half of the park Future World. So they decided World Showcase is staying. That's a neighborhood now, and it's no longer a land or whatever it is that we're referring to it as beforehand. Future World is now being divided into 3 neighborhoods: World Celebration, World Discovery, and World Nature. I really like the neighborhood concept. I think it brings an energy to the park of, this is a exploration of avant-garde concepts and we're going to educate you in these fields that will ultimately impact our future. Educating the general public about space at the Space Pavilion is more important than telling them, hey, look, this is the future of space, am I right? One day we're going to go to space more. Not really true, anyway, but it just, I don't know. I like the neighborhood concept, and it works out, because even if you were to build a perfect Epcot, what I call perfect Epcot, where you somehow manage to squeeze every single attraction that has ever been built at Epcot, so let's say Innoventions and Communicore could coexist. Like you build Innoventions on top of Communicore or something. Or, you know, you just build, you know, the Wonders of Xandar Pavilion behind the Universe of Energy Pavilion or something, whatever it is. If you build perfect Epcot, these neighborhoods still make sense. World Discovery, for example, Wonders of Life, I don't know, out of the 4 neighborhoods, it makes the most sense in World Discovery for me. You look at Innoventions, that works well in World Celebration. I don't know, it's kind of interesting to view it through that neighborhood lens, and that neighborhood lens really recontextualizes the park as, hey, this park is a means of exploring complex ideas, and we're going to simplify them down for you. We're going to break it down in chunks. We're going to get big concepts like discovery, nature, celebration is kind of a lazy name, but it's probably the biggest one I have an issue with. But anyway, you know, take these big ideas, break it down. Now you have pavilions. You're in World Discovery. What pavilion do you want to go to? Do you want to go to the World of Motion Pavilion, ride Test Track? I still call it the World of Motion Pavilion because Transportation Pavilion just doesn't make sense to me, and we're still using the old logo, so, you know. It's the World of Motion Pavilion. I'm sorry. You know, do you want to learn about space? Go to the Space Pavilion. Do you want to learn what the wonders of Xandar means? Go to that. And then from there, within those pavilions, then you have individual attractions, which can be used to, you know, through different lenses, especially if you have something like the Land Pavilion where you have multiple attractions. You have like, okay, I do want to learn what, you know, I do want to learn about the imagination. So am I going to ride Journey into Imagination with a Figment, or I mean, I guess that also doesn't really work because all we otherwise have is full attraction-wise is the Disney Pixar Short Film Festival, which sucks. I didn't say that I'm going to be all positive here, but it's just the framing through which we perceive this park, how we navigate it, that is my biggest, I guess, compliment towards this park in its current form. I like that we are seeing things as they are, how I've seen them. Because as a kid, it didn't make sense to me. What does Nemo have to do with the future? But now it's like, I feel like if I were a kid visiting Epcot today, I'd kind of get it. Because it's world nature. That's nature, and understanding nature helps us make a better future. I know plenty of people who, maybe not personally, but I've read Instagram and YouTube comments of people being like, you know, I became a botanist because of, you know, living with the land, or I became a marine biologist because of the seas. And it's like, I still see Epcot doing that. I still see people walking out inspired. I feel inspired every day walking around that park. So, I don't know. And I think talking about this subject of framing, the really interesting thing to me is this idea that current Epcot is the way that it is because computers are at our fingertips. We are dealing with a massive education crisis right now. Many more children are illiterate in this country than ever before, despite more children in this country being in school than ever before. We have a massive climate crisis going on. We can't seem to figure out how not to be racist and towards one another. We can't figure out how not to just, you know, have our biggest world leaders threaten each other with nukes. Like, our world is kind of in a scary place right now, and in a very uneducated place right now. But I do understand the narrative that was working against, especially 90s Epcot, when people were complaining about how boring and stale the park was getting. That we have the internet. If I want to learn about energy, I'm not going to write Ellen's energy adventure. I'm just going to read about it on the internet. And I get that. I think the biggest goal that new Epcot should have, and I think does have to some degree, is that it's a jumping off point. It's a jumping off point for people to visualize concepts that they otherwise wouldn't have considered interesting, you know, because it was presented to them in a 3D physical space, and that communicates a lot more to a person than, you know. So I think changing the nature of these attractions too is vital, because if the goal has shifted from educating people, which I don't think that Epcot shouldn't educate people, but if the goal has moved from educating people to more so enacting inspiration in those same people, I don't think that it's in the park's best interest if we keep around attractions that are so, you know, this is, and by the way, I like I said, I love Awesome Planet, I love things like that, but I do understand why the general public wouldn't respond to it, because if I want to learn about the climate crisis, I'm gonna watch a YouTube video on it that's gonna be more honest with me anyways. People can see past that. People can see past edutainment and kind of the phoniness that is inherent to it. So themed entertainment has a obligation to adapt a little bit. Not fully shape, because I do think that theme parks have and can shaped the culture and have shaped our understandings of the world around us more so than we might be aware of. You might have visited Disney World one time as a kid, but I'm willing to bet that that impacted you way more than you think it did. It impacted how you perceive the world. It impacted how you understand art. It impacted all these things. So new EPCOT, if Disney's goal is going to be to somehow inspire and or educate people, I think the inspiration lens is the better one to go through right now, because we are not dealing with a crisis of information. We are dealing with a crisis of people not wanting to take in that information because in some way there's a roadblock. There's a roadblock and we don't know how to get past it. We don't know how to find botany interesting. We don't know how to find marine biology interesting. We don't know how to explain to kids that the water cycle is interesting. So we just keep recycling the same old science fair projects on, a 3-piece poster board. And we just keep being like, this is the water cycle. And I think old EPCOT, to some degree, as much as I love it, did do that a little bit. And it's not that I don't think that we should continue to make educational attractions. It's that we need to change how we perceive the notion of education. Education now, I feel like, is much more about inspiring people to want to learn and use the resources at their disposal rather than actually be that resource. Because we have those resources, we just have no means of wanting to use them. So, new EPCOT's goal should be, hey, the world can be a cool place, and learning about the world can be a fun thing. So let's do that. Let's do that together. Let's get into a couple of things. We're not going to go super into detail. We're not going to bore you with a 45-minute attraction about oil. We're going to just show you, like, hey, here's the thing. And one attraction that I might do a separate video about, if this video does somewhat well, I do want to get into Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, because when it was announced, I admit I was furious. Not that I have any sort of as you've heard in this video, I probably mocked the Universe of Energy Pavilion more so than any other. But I think the Wonders of Xandar Pavilion is probably the most crucial parts of this update. What I think the Wonders of Xandar Pavilion is doing, and I know this is a stretch, this Wonders of Xandar Pavilion is not a replacement for the Universe of Energy. It is a replacement for Horizons. And it's not that I think the attraction itself, if you look up Cosmic Rewind POV and it's just the ride, I get why that sounds absolutely insane. But hear me out. We know that at least those of us who have ridden Cosmic Rewind enough or, understand just on a pretty basic theme park history lens what this is doing. Cosmic Rewind's general conceit in the queue is that, there's that kind of tongue-in-cheek Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn energy of like, we're going to make fun of edutainment. I don't think it's as much of a mocking, though, because I know, the WDWNT guy, Tom, Tom Corliss, he's like, yeah, this is, I'm he's like personally offended that, and by the way, I don't blame him. This is his experience with art, and also, I see nothing wrong with saying the word offended. I don't like that our culture has turned that into a word that we can't use without it having some kind of a political connotation, but I promise you, this is not a, culture war thing. I genuinely just feel as though he is personally in some way offended by the notion of edutainment being mocked, and but no disservice to him because he's entitled to that, much like how I'm entitled to being offended by many things. I'm offended by so many things, dude. There's nothing wrong with that. Humans are offensive. We can be offended. Saying that somebody is offended by a thing and making that assessment is not a judgment of their inherent value as a human being. But the thing about this attraction that's so intriguing to me is that there's a police siren going on. They found me. They found the guy talking about EPCOT in the woods. The thing that's so interesting to me about this experience and this queue area specifically is that it takes Walt's vision of EPCOT, the one that actually existed, not the one that's a made-up narrative so that we can, sell, those Walt the Dreamer statues, in gift shop form. It's like, no, This is his vision of a corporate town, garden city utopia. It's this attraction takes that idea and presents it to the general public through the lens of which, oh, see, this is just Xandar. This is that movie that you saw, yeah, the city in that movie, yeah. This is what that was. So the general public, obviously, who is just skimming the line, doesn't care, just wants to get on a roller coaster. Totally fair. I don't blame them. It's hard for somebody to get into, being educated by that. But that queue contains so many inspirational vignettes of, like, even if it's not fully educating you on it, the fact that it brings up the fact that radial cities prevent urban sprawl, the fact that it depicts a functioning military that exists only to be a defender and not an offensive player in geopolitics, the fact that this area educates you on the value of design and how much it matters to be intentional when designing anything, whether that be, a city or whether that be a spaceship or whatever, it is a matter of, hey, look, people in the world, the things that exist around you that are made by humans, those things are really cool because those took time. Those things are made by people who care, and you should be another one of those people who care. It doesn't matter what it is that you care about, just care about something. And to me, that is not more effective than Horizons, because obviously it's lost on most of the general public, and the Disney adults who visit see it as, oh, that's a reference to EPCOT. Look, it's a Walt Disney. I like Walt Disney. Hi, Walt Disney. Like, it's not... It's not any more effective than Horizons was, but it inspires me. Like I said, this video is all about how, if you haven't gathered in the last 40 minutes, this video is about my personal experience in being someone who, for a year, worked for the Walt Disney Company, wasn't a big fan of my job, I'll be honest, but enjoyed my experience because I got to, on my days off, visit a theme park. And sometimes I'd visit other parks. I went to Universal, both Universal parks quite a few times, visited Magic Kingdom. I worked at Magic Kingdom, so I didn't visit Magic Kingdom a whole lot, but because it felt like I was there every day anyway. And, Hollywood Studios, Animal Kingdom, love those parks. But EPCOT was where I was most of the time. And it was mostly just me walking around, feeling really sad about the state of our world and kind of undergoing a crisis of faith. As a religious person, I struggle to take the world and be like, hey, this is okay, because it's such an abstract world compared to the one that I feel like is possible, the one that I see reflected in, like, my best of friends, or the one that I call the creator of the universe, or, any, it's like, wow, God, and I don't want to go on like a religious tangent here, but it's just like, wow, Jesus, we are so different from you. And I get that that's the point, but man, like, doesn't that kind of suck that we're so, like off? What is wrong with us? And EPCOT was a park that, in that time of that major crisis of faith, stepped in for me. Not that I, like, oh my gosh, EPCOT saved my life or anything. Like, it's a corporate product, but it did a lot for me in the sense that I got to walk around a place that, in its current form, with, World Celebration primarily being, transformed, and one argument that I made for this area has been that it's reminiscent of the third places, the third spaces that we so desperately lack in most American cities. In a lot of cities across the world, but especially American cities with such urban sprawl. So many kids out there do not know that libraries exist. They don't know that that community centers exist. The YMCA has like such a huge fee, like a membership fee annually, and it's disgusting because it used to just be a place where like mostly unhoused people could hang out and, you know, actually exist as human beings and not feel alienated by, you know, anti-homeless infrastructure. It's and to me, I could just walk around a place with nice music. I could walk around a place with a few educational experiences still left, and otherwise the rest of the park is padded by an understanding that, hey, the world is still going to be okay, at least for a little bit. You know, the earth might actively be on fire a little bit right now, but right now you're safe. And there's such a value in that. And I get that that's personal, and I get that so many people would say, well, but that's not based in anything, and you clearly don't understand themed entertainment, and you don't understand art, and you don't understand... it's like... But I felt good experiencing and participating in art. I got to walk around a physical space that imagines what a better future looks like. If that's not EPCOT, I don't know what is. I got to look at the, you know, original, the Norm, I apologize if I'm getting his last name incorrect, I absolutely am, and I'm so sorry, Norm McIntyre. His logos came back, and some new ones were designed recently for some of the new pavilions, even like the Play Pavilion that was canceled. It's beautiful that I get to walk around a space where it's like, hey, look, there's a kid out there right now who is probably 6 or 7, and he's looking at that logo for, let's say, I don't know, the land or something. He's looking at the land logo right now, which otherwise was very difficult to find during my childhood. He's looking at that, he's saying, what does that mean? What does that little leaf thing mean? Why is it green? Why does it look like that? And he gets to decipher that through his day, and he gets to walk into the building and be like, oh, this is what this is. And, oh, this is... and these are connections that I would have, as a child, been making. So don't tell me, you know, that that no child thinks like that, and that no, you know, if you replaced that experience with anything else, you know, let's say 90s EPCOT that other people want to defend because it was a part of their childhoods, and fair, but like, you know, you want to say like, well, Interventions educated me more, and it actually had substance in it, and like, sure, yeah, but sometimes abstract things are okay. Sometimes not everything needs to be, I love children's museums, I love all these different things where, you know, kids have the ability to, you know, which by the way I'll get into with Journey of Water and everything in a sec, but there's, to me, there's no lack of stuff like children's museums and stuff out there. And I'm sorry to say that, because as much as I would like even more of them, I don't think EPCOT needs to be a children's museum. I don't think it needs to be a place where everything is so tangible and so, you know, this is an idea that's being handed to you and we're going to explain what this thing is. Not that it wasn't valuable when the park was that. Both in the 80s, I'd say mostly in the 90s with Interventions, it was like that. But I don't think EPCOT needs to always be this thing of, here's an attraction, the attraction is explicitly educational, and it only serves as a means of delivering information to you and not inspiring you in any way. Not that previous EPCOT attractions didn't do that, but to me as a child, it struck me as, this thing's trying to educate me. I don't like that. My brain turns off. So I think it's just about appealing to a different, newer age. And I know that there's still that conservative thinking of, and I agree with it, like, right now I'm in the woods right now, and there's something great about that. I'm talking to myself, basically, in the woods, walking around, about a thing that I like, taking the time to not, you know, be on TikTok or whatever. I agree that there is sometimes the old ways are good ways, but we can't not pretend like the culture hasn't shifted. We can't not pretend, and there's still, like, to those saying that, oh, you know, Communicore Hall is an empty conference hall, and Interventions had so much more substance. It's like, yeah, maybe in that one space, but did you go next door? Because we just opened up a whole new pavilion, about the water cycle. And walking around it, when I got to do it, every single time, I kid you not, it nearly brought me to tears. Looking at families, reading the little signs and looking and being like, this is cool. Like, look, here's the water cycle. Here's what's, like, there are ways to entertain and educate and inspire. Much like how Card Walker dedicated the park and said that those were the 3 guiding core principles of the park. And hopefully, no news outlets have covered this, by the way. I just saw, I think it was an Adam the Woo video or something where he mentioned this. But I think right now they're changing the plaque in front of the park with that dedication on it, and I really hope this is not going away. I just hope that it's being transformed, because it was transformed for the 90s, and now it's, so I'm just hoping that that's what they're doing again, and they're not just fully removing it. But anyway, this is the part of the video that I feel like is the most jumbled mess. I apologize. This has gone on for way too long, but all I'm trying to say is we have a beautiful park here, both the one that I'm standing in and EPCOT in its current form. And I'm not saying there's not room for improvement. I feel like I'm kind of lost, so we're gonna get out of here. No, there's a beauty. There's a beauty in current EPCOT, and it might be different from that of the old park in many of its previous forms. And I do have my issues with it. I've talked about a few here, but like, for me, the first biggest thing that signaled the new EPCOT changes was Frozen Ever After, which I think is one of the worst attractions ever designed by Walt Disney Imagineering. Not defending that, but guess what? I'm not dwelling on it. And it's also not me. It's not an act of spite that Maelstrom is gone when I say that too. I did like Maelstrom. I do think that it brought value to a lot of park experiences, many people who visited the park, including myself as a child, but it was time for it to go. I don't think Frozen Ever After was the best, because it doesn't understand Frozen, it doesn't understand dark ride structure, and it doesn't understand EPCOT. But guess what? Like, I still think that there's hope for EPCOT, much like how I think there's still hope for the world. You can make arguments that it's being eaten away, but I think that if it is being eaten away, it's very slowly. It's not the reactionary, EPCOT is doomed, Walt would be rolling in his grave narrative that we like to spin, because it gets us more clicks, it gets us more ad revenue, it gets us more clout for being the guy who stood up and talked about how bad new EPCOT is. I understand themed entertainment more than you. I'm going to talk about how terrible it is, and I'm not going to be mentioning that this is, just my personal philosophy. No, from a park planning perspective, this is objectively terrible. I just don't think that it's fair to be doing that. I think that it's very fair to criticize art when we think that it's bad, and especially when we think that it's doing real world harm. Do you think that EPCOT genuinely is a socially irresponsible thing, that current Walt Disney World leadership is actively damaging the world by continuing in its ways? I can't argue with that, or not. I could argue with that, but I'm not. Also, I won't argue in that, like, it's a large media conglomerate that sucks, and just by it existing is inherently evil. But if we're talking about the destruction of EPCOT and why that is a bad thing, I can argue, but I also don't know if I could really agree. I can't agree, but I can't disagree with the notion that this is your opinion, that this is your lens in which you perceive the world and through which you perceive themed entertainment. It's fair. And I sound like a crazy person because I'm rambling and I'm saying a lot of the same things over and over again. I apologize. But I just hope that even if I didn't detail why most of this is good or bad and why this pavilion works and why this one doesn't, and even if I didn't do that, despite how much time that I have been speaking, I hope that you gain something from this in hearing another person's opinion. Not that I educated you any further or deeper on this, but that you understand, listen, new Epcot maybe isn't the worst thing ever, objectively, because there is no such thing as being objective when it comes to art. And guess what? There's at least one human being in this world who cares about old Epcot, but also is genuinely pretty optimistic about where it's going. I don't know if this is the end of the video or not. I do want to mention this though. When I was on my DCP, I used to do usually Epcot days where I'd not only walk around the park, but I'd sometimes devote myself. I'm like, I gotta do every single attraction here today, because I'm an insane person. Without any genie or anything, because I don't care to support that at all. I think it's very anti-consumer what Disney's doing in that park planning perspective. But so I do, I would just go to Epcot and just hang out and try and do everything. Just to be like, if I were a guest and I didn't know anything about this park walking in, what would I gain? What would I feel? How would I feel about the world? And I would always walk out inspired. And one experience that specifically stands out to me as a really, wow, I didn't even really like this attraction, and it, I feel like made me a better person, was, I'd have, on those days, one of the easiest attractions I would always do every single time is Mission Space, because it never has a long wait. And I never really did the orange team. I did it a few times. One time when a friend was visiting, and another time just because. And it just makes me sick. But I did the green team a lot because usually absolutely not one person in line, and it's just a fun little experience. The green team, anyway, to those of you not familiar, they did, because this was one of the more not documented, or at least was far enough back that a lot of people don't remember that this is the thing that happened, but Mission Space was refurbed so that the orange team got new graphics, but it's the same general concept. It was just remastered in 4K, I believe. And the green team was changed to an Earth mission, where it's essentially soaring. You get slingshotted around the Earth, and that's kind of it. And there was something, every single time that I rode this, I'm like, part of me understood deeply, yes, this is not educational. There's barely anything of genuine substance being told here. I'm someone who, I like that there are other people working in STEM, because as someone who loves arts and everything, I love film. That's my thing. I'm the type of person who I appreciate when other people are interested in more science-y or math kind of things, because that's never been my strong suit. But I love that other people are into it, so I don't have to be that guy. And that includes space stuff too. I think it's a travesty that we have been shutting down our space program piece by piece, and not launching people into space anymore, so that, complete assholes like Elon Musk, quote, pick up the pieces, even though it's just an effort of, colonizing Mars, just because, I don't know, climate change, and billionaires get to go, billionaires get to stay safe, but we have to die here. But one thing that I loved about my Mission Space experiences on that Earth team, so I'd always be alone in those vehicles. There's never anybody in line, so I'd always have my own cabin. And I just kind of sit there, and it's always kind of funny because, the other three seats are like, pilot, engage this, and then the button just clicks itself. It's funny to watch, but I felt, aside from the humor in that, I found myself really entranced by the beauty. Not that it still feels like an old simulator. You still hear the woo as you're turning left and right. It feels like an attraction that's 20 years older than it actually is. And I'm talking 2003 and back, we're even counting that. But it's technically a new Epcot edition. And It's not educating me. But I walked out every time feeling really, really good that there is someone out there who learned that India is really, really a bright place to fly over. If you were in an airplane or if you were in a spaceship and you flew over India, that'd be a really, really bright city to fly over. Or, you know, here's the Northern Lights. Not gonna explain to you what that is, but here's the Northern Lights. I think so much about how, especially kids, I'm not like gonna go into boomer mode here, but I'm gonna go a little bit into boomer mode, where I say, so many kids on their phones, and for good reason. What reason do they have to look up? Like, the world is a scary, terrible place, as far as they know. And I just know for a fact, like on a deep soul level, that there is a child who otherwise would have never known that the Northern Lights existed if it weren't for the fact that mission space was right there. I like felt it like deep every single time, specifically like the Northern Lights and the India thing. It just, and it's not that that kid couldn't have found out that information, but I just know that there's a child who never in their life will ever hear those two pieces of sort of information, never be informed of those two factoids unless it weren't for that attraction. And I'm not saying that, you know, if we replace mission space with like a much more educational experience, that they also wouldn't have gotten something out of it, but I just felt something deep. I felt like there's a child who now is going to go home and Google Northern Lights, who's going to Google India, and is going to learn about those things. And if you're going to tell me that that's not substantive enough, if that's not doing enough for our kids, fair, that's fine. But you can't argue that that's not something that's happening, at least somewhere out there in the world, even if it's for one kid. And that kid would have listened. There's some child who, like me, wouldn't have listened if it weren't for the fact that this broccoli was being fed to them. Even if it's a tiny little piece of broccoli, they wouldn't have eaten the brownie with the broccoli in it if it weren't for the fact that the broccoli was so small. But now that the broccoli was small, now they want a bigger piece of broccoli. And it's not that, you know, there's not kids who wouldn't respond to more educational stuff. It's that one kid who wasn't going to listen got to listen now, finally. He got a moment to find something interesting because it was so just kind of not even handed to him. It was just kind of a thing that was there. There is a kid who is looking at that mural right now in Connections, that beautiful mural, and he's like, wow, that's a cool mural. It's not telling me factoids about, you know, did you know that rice is harvested from this, and you know, there's all these different things. No, that kid is just like, that's a cool mural. And sure, it could be more educational, but if there were words on that wall, that kid would be looking down at his phone immediately, but he's going to look up for a second from his phone while Coco Melon's playing or something. And he's going to look up at the wall, and he's going to say, that's a really cool wall. I'm going to look at that a little bit more. I'm going to look at that mural. I'm going to look at that painting. I'm going to look at all the different people and cultures represented on it. While my parents, you know, try and get a virtual queue for Guardians, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to look at a wall for a second. And I know that that's not going to speak for most kids. And I know that there's other kids out there who would respond better to a more substantive wall with a ton of words on it, explaining to them everything. That one kid's looking at the wall. I don't know. This has been really jumbled. This has been a jumbled mess, and I've been talking for an hour. And I apologize for talking for an hour. Nobody is watching this at all, but I'm going to post it anyway. Because guess what? I'm the one kid looking at the wall. Or I'm one of the kids looking at the wall. There's at least one other kid out there looking at a wall. But I'm looking at the wall too. I'm going to look at this wall right now. But when I go back to EPCOT, I'm going to look at the wall in Connections again. Because it's a cool wall. tired of pretending like it's not. Communicore Hall is not just a hall. It's a place that reminds me of an old thing. Also, that's the other point that I wanted to make. Nostalgia. I love nostalgia baiting. I'm going to undermine all my points. Ah!